Welcome back to Black News Tonight. The spirit of Malcolm X is alive and well as those of us inspired by his contributions and sacrifices pay tribute to the late luminary on his 96th birthday. Today we remember the life and we consider the works of the towering intellectual, the towering political activist, the towering thinker who was born in Omaha, Nebraska on May 19, 1925, who fought many of the battles still being fought till this day before being assassinated on February 21st, 1965 in the Audubon Ballroom. Malcolm X exhibited the ingenuity of black consciousness, the power of liberation, the beauty of social transformation, and the revolutionary spirit of being black in a world that hates black people. Here to shine light on our beloved brother Malcolm X is journalist Abdur-Rahman Muhammad from the critically acclaimed Netflix series Who Killed Malcolm X. My dear brother, good to see you.
Good seeing you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Who is Malcolm? Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Who is Malcolm X?
Well, Malcolm X is a brother just like you or I, a man who was born with no silver spoon in his mouth, a man who, as a youth, took a wrong path in life, and he faced all of the obstacles that an African American would have to endure during the Great Depression, and during the 40s. He first embarked upon a life of crime, was incarcerated for a time, about 6.5 years, but completely transformed his life into becoming one of the most radical intellectuals and revolutionaries of the 20th century.
And that's an important point you make. One of the most important and radical figures, intellectuals of the 20th century, because there are people who be like, it's Black News Tonight. Why would you devote a whole show basically to the life and legacy of Malcolm X? But I think sometimes people miss just how impactful Malcolm has been to the development of our politics, our education, and of course our faith. How does Malcolm go from being a figure who was on the underside of American life to somebody who becomes hailed as almost an international leader, almost like a head of state around the world?
Well, because he's quintessentially the American story. He's a man who came up, as the young people say nowadays, up from the mud. And he raised himself up through the power of learning, through the power of education, and self-reflection. And he literally transformed himself into a force for justice and liberation for Black people in America. And his impact, I would say, is more pervasive today than it was in his own lifetime. I mean, just recently, over the course of the last year and a half or so, we've had, at least five that I can count, major cultural productions related to his life. We could talk about The Godfather of Harlem. My series, Who Killed Malcolm X, is a phenomenal new biography that just came out, The Dead Are Rising by Les Payne. We had One Night in Miami. And of course, there's a new book that just came out on his mother, The Life and Legacy of Louise Norton Little. So we're finding now that Malcolm is being quoted more today than even Dr. Martin Luther King.
I'm glad you mentioned these other figures too, like his mother, because a lot of times people see Malcolm as the consummate self-taught person, the consummate autodidact. But Malcolm is saved because of his sister Ella. Malcolm is saved because of the love of Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm is saved because someone in prison reached out to him, and Brother Bembry, and gave him access to knowledge. I mean, Malcolm is also sort of a reflection of what happens when community throws love and nurture around somebody who's in the mud.
And we can trace that directly back to the influence of his parents, who were committed Garveyites. And one of the things that we learn in some of this new material that's coming out about Malcolm is that something that I really didn't know is that Marcus Garvey actually visited their home in Omaha, Nebraska. That's how, committed and, just devoted to the cause of black liberation, black empowerment in America. So yes, you can see it in the influence of his parents. You can see it in the influence of his brothers and sisters. But of course, as you mentioned, the influence of the Nation of Islam on his life, Elijah Muhammad, that is undeniable.
You made a film series, Who Killed Malcolm X? Why was it important for you to unpack that story, which, over time we've come to realize that the men who were incarcerated for killing Malcolm X didn't do it. Your film points to a brother in Newark who most people who are in know seem to think did it. Why is it important for us to uncover that story right now?
Because, Mark, whether we realized it or not, the mystery or the questions surrounding the assassination of Malcolm X were a gaping wound in the heart of our community. And I've come to learn, since the series has gone all over the world, it's been a gaping wound in the heart of the world community. And it's a question that needed to be resolved, and it had to be resolved in our lifetime, because given one more, let's say, generation, the ability to solve it would have been lost.
One of the ways you attempt to help us not lose the memory of Malcolm X is through your own work in the community as a community organizer, as a community educator, and through a course you teach on Malcolm X. Can you tell us about the course?
Yeah, I teach a course online. There's really nothing like it. It's called the Autobiography of Malcolm X course that's taught on Zoom. It's 60 hours of instruction where we actually pull back the veil on that book, and we explore the life of Malcolm in his earliest stages of his life. We identify characters, iconic characters that have remained something of a mystery to us. People like John Elton Bembry, who is of course Bimby, the prison intellectual, the young woman who he got arrested with, Sophia, his white girlfriend, and of course his man Shorty. We go into great detail about how these events shaped his life, in particular his autodidactic period in the Norfolk State Prison Colony, where he goes from being Malcolm Little to Malcolm X, the towering public intellectual, revolutionary, and leader of our people. That was really the incubator under the teachings of, Elijah Muhammad. And I never want to mitigate that or be unfair to them. They did, they had an enormous impact on transforming his life. His involvement in the Nation of Islam, it could be argued, shaved off about 3 or 4 years off of his prison sentence just for the reformative power that it had on his life.
Absolutely. And you could argue there is no Malcolm without the Nation of Islam. I would certainly make that argument. Brother Abdur-Rahman, thank you so much for joining me. We make sure we check out that class. I might sit in a few lectures myself.
It would be an honor. It would be an honor, Mark.